World Trade Center complex.
None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free.
German philosopher Goethe. The whole world saw it. Those jets flew into the skyscrapers. There were enormous explosions, and the fires brought the buildings down. We all saw it with our own eyes. Everybody knows it. I have heard this or similar refrains from numerous people as they look at you with this incredulous gaze that someone would even doubt that it happened as explained on the tube. However, there is more to this story than meets the eye, especially the eye that has been exposed to the filter of corporate television. Point 23. Construction on the World Trade Center buildings 1 and 2, that's north and south, was commenced on September the 11th, 1971. At 1,350 feet, they were two of the tallest and most famous buildings on Earth. One fact most people did not know is that they were engineered and built like the proverbial brick outhouses. These buildings were over-engineered to withstand major storms and hits from large airliners. They were built with 47 enormous interior steel core columns, together with 236 large exterior steel columns that were welded and bolted together with steel plates. Further, there were steel trusses which crisscrossed, making a mesh that connected every other exterior column. Plus, there was diagonal bracing and steel rods connecting the trusses. There were also corrugated pans with poured concrete on every floor, and all of this was anchored in a very deep and heavy foundation. Point 24. The buildings were architecturally designed to absorb energy and to sway in storms. According to witnesses who were in the building relatively near to where the planes made contact, the towers briefly swayed for seconds as intended. Other witnesses in the area said that the noise and blasts were significant, but the tremor felt at the time of contact was minimal. Point 25. Fact: no steel-structured building in New York, the United States, or in the world has ever come down due to fire. In the last 100 years, literally dozens of steel buildings have caught on fire and burned for long periods of time and have not come down. A good example is the Meridian Plaza in Philadelphia, a 38-story office building that in 1991 had a hot fire. It burned on 8 floors for 19 hours, and 3 firefighters died combating the blaze, but it did not come close to bringing down the building. In contrast, the World Trade Center North Tower fire lasted 1 hour and 43 minutes. And the World Trade Center South Tower fire lasted 56 minutes. The fires in both towers burned significant proportions of rubble, sheetrock, carpet, furniture, etc., producing lots of black smoke, indicating they were burning inefficiently and were relatively cool fires. Point 26. The facts. A. Steel melts at 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. B. Jet fuel, when mixed in precise proportions with air, will burn briefly at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. C. Because of the debris, carpeting, sheetrock, furniture, concrete, aluminum, etc., and lack of oxygen, the fire at the World Trade Center probably burned at 1,200 to 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Point 27. It must also be remembered that a significant portion of the fuel exploded outside of the buildings. The exterior columns were exposed to the air on 3 sides and would dissipate heat at a fast rate, and the beams and columns were coated with fireproofing materials. Point 28. The official story is the buildings came down at point of contact because the intensity of the fires caused the trusses to push out the columns. Yet, when one views the hole created in the North Tower by the plane, there are only relatively small fires, and the heat must not be excessive because you can see two people standing and staring out near the opening. Point 29. The top section of the South Tower began to tilt at approximately 9:59 a.m. At this moment, a large cloud of gray dust suddenly puffed out of the building. The 35 stories of the top section continued to tip to 23 degrees past vertical. At this point, the upper segment was hanging over the edge by approximately 65 feet. In frame-by-frame pictures, one can see the concentric and uniform mushrooming gray cloud rapidly expand to envelop the building. As this was happening, one can see debris being blown away from the building with an extremely powerful blast. The overhanging upper section of the building was then mysteriously shrouded and was never seen again. Then the whole building came straight down. Within an incredibly fast 10.4 seconds, the once mighty 1,350-foot tower was reduced to a pile of totally pulverized remains. Government's story is that this building experienced a compression or pancake demolition caused from weakened trusses and weight from above. At first, this explanation sounds plausible, especially because this is what the television reports have told us time and time again. However, common sense would indicate that the center of gravity of the top section was not centered over the lower section. Thus, if there was a compression demolition of the building, it would not be uniform because the center of gravity was considerably off-center. Secondly, the severed top section that was tilting very much over the edge would fall somewhat independently. Third, this section would fall at a faster rate than the anchored lower section because it would not meet the resistance of the intact lower section. Fourth, the top and lower sections would break into pieces. They would not pulverize. None of these four things happened. Point 30. The complete demolition of the North Tower at 10:29 a.m. took only 8.1 seconds. The North Tower came neatly down upon itself, and its remains were equally powdered. Point 31. Facts are very stubborn things. According to the law of falling bodies, as originally put forward by Galileo and still accepted today by all scientists, as described in the World Book Encyclopedia under falling bodies, law of, the total distance traveled at the end of any specific time in a total vacuum is calculated by this formula. Distance being d equals 32.16 divided by 2 times time in seconds squared. If there is any resistance, then the speed and time of the falling body slows down in relation to this resistance. In the case of the World Trade Center towers north and south, we know that the towers were 1,350 feet tall. Thus, you would have this equation for the fastest time of total drop in a vacuum. 1,350 equals 32.16 divided by 2 times time in seconds squared. This works out to 9.1627 seconds as the fastest time these buildings could come down. This presents some very interesting questions because the World Trade Center South Tower came down in 10.4 seconds, and the World Trade Center North Tower came down in 8.1 seconds. Additionally, there was resistance, and plenty of it. The resistance was the massive lower sections of the buildings that were stabilized by over 250 major interior and exterior steel columns.